Hello, Taylor Elwood here on the Men's Mysteries podcast. And in this episode, I'm going to talk about why we need men's work more than ever and why I do men's work and why I genuinely believe in it. Because I think that in light of recent events, it's really important to explore the importance of this work and how transformative it can be, but also to recognize that there are some valid concerns and complaints that people have because of some stuff that's going on in the manosphere, so to speak. Different people and have their own ideas of men's work, and there's healthy men's work, and then there's what I would call toxic men's work. And I'm definitely a fan of the former and an avid practitioner of it as opposed to the latter. Now, if you're on the YouTube channel, please, and you're new, please go ahead and click subscribe and click the notification bell so you can get notified. And if you're on the Men's Mysteries Substack, go ahead and restack this episode so that you can share it with other people who might be interested and find this helpful. So, when we talk about men's work, there's definitely some different strains of men's work out there. I mean, there's people such as Andrew Tate, for example, and other Joe Rogan, etc., who have their own notions and ideas as to what men's work is, and generally those ideas of men's work are not geared in a way that I would consider to be healthy. And you certainly see that with some of the literature that's out there as well. However, I am definitely a fan of what I call healthy men's work through organizations such as the Mankind Project, Uncivilized Nation, Sacred Sons, and of course, I'm a men's coach myself, so I do work with men, and I have programs that I offer to men as well in order to help them transform their lives in a really powerful and meaningful way. So I want to note that because I think it's really important to understand and acknowledge that men's work has its own purpose. And a lot of times people get caught up in the idea that, men working on themselves isn't necessarily a good thing. I had someone recently on my Facebook, for example, accuse me of being a fascist because of the fact that I'm engaged in men's work. And I had another person who kind of said, like, well, you seem to think that men's work is the solution to everything. Well, I don't know that men's work is the solution to everything. I've never actually painted as such, and I don't think of it as that. I do think, though, that it is an integral part of the solution, especially for men. But also for other people as well, because when men are doing their work and they are showing up in a space where they feel safe and they are able to deconstruct and take apart the patriarchal narratives that are embedded in their lives, then they're going to be safer for themselves and each other, and as a result, they're going to be safer for the other people in their lives. And unfortunately, the reality is that we live in a world where there is a lot of patriarchal narratives going on. And there is a lot of unhealthy examples of toxic masculinity that are at work. A good example, in my opinion, is the soon-to-be president of the United States. You may or may not agree with me, but given some of the behaviors that he's engaged in over the years, that to me is an example of toxic masculinity, and he's not the only person out there that demonstrates that behavior. He's just one of the more visible ones. And here's the thing, at the end of the day, is this work going to, if someone introduced this work to him, would he automatically become a better person? Not necessarily. He'd have to do a lot of work. I don't think that men's work is automatically a guarantee that someone who says, yeah, I want to do men's work, that they're automatically going to become a better person. It's a process. It takes time. I say this at the time of this recording, over 2 years, almost 2.5 years of doing this work. And yes, it's transformed my life. I've become a lot more confident, empowered, embodied. I've become a lot more present and aware, and I've definitely taken responsibility and accountability for things that I did in the past where before I would have probably played the victim, or at least I wouldn't have taken responsibility in the same way. I was not always the healthy person that I am now, and I'm working on continuing to become a healthier person each and every day, and men's work plays a significant role in that work. I'm also an advocate, though, for men going to therapy. I'm an advocate for men getting help if they are like in addiction. So going to like an Alcoholics Anonymous or Sexaholics Anonymous or whatever the version of addiction is. And I'm a huge believer that when men have healthy friendships with other men, it makes a significant difference in their lives because they're able to talk about the challenges and frustrations and stresses that are occurring in their lives, and they're able to do it in a manner where they're not going to be judged. And I hate to say this, but there's a certain truth to this that, if I as a man am in a relationship with a woman or a significant other, and I go and I say, I've got a lot of stuff going on, I'm dealing with a lot of things, I'm feeling really stressed and pressured. That may be something that she is not necessarily going to want to handle or deal with. And that's where men's work comes in handy. Because if I can go and I can meet with other men and talk about the stresses and the challenges and the stuff that I'm dealing with in a way where I know I'm not going to be judged, in a way where I know I'm not going to be told, oh, you need to behave a certain way, or you're too much, or something else like that, then it gives me a context. And it also helps because I realize I'm not alone. And yes, going to therapy can help with that as well. But here's the thing. It is nice to sometimes meet with other men and know that there really isn't a power differential at work in place. Because if I'm going and I'm talking to a therapist, in a very real sense, that therapist is there to listen to me. They may offer some advice, but they're not going to necessarily be able to connect in quite the same way. They have a specific role, and they are meant to be a guide and a facilitator, and that's important. And as a men's coach, that is some of the work I do as well. I don't do it in the same vein. For example, if a man has like some really deep and serious trauma, I'm going to recommend that man goes and meets with a therapist, because that therapist is going to be equipped to deal with that trauma in a way that I'm not. Nonetheless, one thing that's really important is that if I sit in circle with another man or other men, and I'm able to share what's going on in my life, and I'm able to do it in a place where I don't feel judged, and where I also get to hear their stories, and I get to have this sense of I'm not alone, that's important. That's important work. It's work that helps a man feel like, oh, okay, I can be seen and heard without being judged. And, I get that there are a lot of people out there that can justifiably say, like, you know what, I don't necessarily want to make space for men to speak up and talk about what they're dealing with. Men already occupy this position of power and hierarchy, etc., etc. And you know what? I get it. I get that. I hear that. And here's the thing. Most men do not have that power or hierarchy in quite the way that you think. I mean, we're all dealing with the detrimental effects of patriarchy, and with patriarchy, it really is kind of a pyramid. Like, there's one person at the top, or a few people at the top, and then everything else is top down. And I want to be clear that I don't at the same time make light of the fact that men have a lot of privilege, and that's unexamined. And that as a white man, I have even more privilege in some ways, and that there are challenges that an indigenous person or a man of color is going to face that I don't necessarily fully understand. And I own that. I recognize that. I'm not by any means putting any of that aside. And that's not even including some of the challenges that somebody else faces that's not that doesn't identify as a man. You know, whether that person's non-binary or identifies as some type of other gender or identifies as a woman, there can be some real challenges and stresses that I as a man do not know and cannot comprehend. Not fully. So I want to be clear about that because I think it's really important to note that a lot of times men have not always examined or understood that there are some very real differences in the world, and that a lot of times that sometimes men can be pretty fucking oblivious to the challenges that other people are dealing with. And we look at this most recent election, and here basically, you know, women's rights, trans rights, queer rights, immigrant rights, all of those things. There's basically been a referendum that says, yeah, we don't really care about any of those rights, or we only care about them within a specific context. And if you're not from the right place, or whatever else, we don't care. And I feel like this is one of the reasons actually why men's work is needed more than ever, because men need to care about this. But not only that, but men need to step up and recognize, like, hey, if I'm a white man, for example, I need to step up and recognize that the way I show up in the world around me matters. And that if I'm just hiding behind my whiteness and my masculinity because other people are doing what they're doing, I'm essentially condoning what they're doing. I am complicit in what they are doing. I don't want to live in a world like that. I don't want to be part of that kind of thing. And yet that's a reality that I'm recognizing even more so than ever as a result of this election. And I say this too as like a heterosexual man. I mean, I'm a straight white man. So, you know, that's one of the things that also stands out to me. You know, so I say all that because I think it's really important to recognize that, and not take it lightly. And I think that, you know, it is really important to do this work. When I meet with other men and I am able to share what's going on in my life, and I'm also able to speak to current events, to other things, like this is where we kind of get the opportunity to step up. And again, I recognize that, you know, some people are going to say, yeah, that doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter what you do. Well, you know what? That's fair enough. Like, I get it. But I'm going to be an advocate for men's work for the rest of my life because I've seen how it's changed my life. I went from living a life of quiet desperation. And you wouldn't have necessarily always known that. I mean, if you were to look at my life from the outside, you might think, yeah, he's pretty successful. He's written books. He's held down a job. He's sometimes been self-employed. He seems to have had some good relationships. And yet, I can tell you that I felt a lot of stress and anxiety, fear, a lot of the time, and I didn't really express it very well. That didn't mean that people didn't see through it, but I wasn't necessarily being honest with myself or with those people. And when I discovered men's work and I discovered, like, wow, I'm not alone, that there are other men who are facing some real challenges and some real stresses here, that changed a lot for me. It helped me see that, like, okay, here's a way that I can show up in the world differently. And I started to show up in the world differently. I took responsibility for my choices in a way that I never had before. I became accountable in a way that I hadn't. I began doing work in other directions and veins. And this is all work that I think is absolutely essential for changing our lives. And, you know, it's also about community. When men are able to come together in community and connect with each other in a safe and healthy environment, and they're able to express the challenges and issues that they're having, and they're able to do the work to heal the trauma from the past, both trauma they've experienced and trauma that they have perpetuated and caused, well, That right there is huge because community is part of the medicine that we need. In the United States, I don't know that we really have a culture or a community. I see lots of subcultures. I see lots of smaller communities, but we don't have an overarching one. And I think that this is part of the reason why we're seeing such polarization, such us versus them. I talked the other day with somebody who voted for Trump. And it was fascinating to hear her reasoning. Part of it was, well, I'm concerned about immigration, and I'm someone who's from Mexico, but I'm concerned that people are getting into the country and going about it the wrong way, and they're getting better pay for some of their abilities and skills than I am. This was a person of color, a Latino. This person also told me that they genuinely thought that Trump was a family man and had good values. I couldn't even begin to understand the cognitive dissonance on that one. But there it was. And of course, this person has some genuine spiritual beliefs that they felt aligned with the values that he, quote unquote, supposedly espouses, and so they voted for him. Why do I share that? Well, one, because I think it's really easy to demonize people right now and say, like, okay, all the people who voted for Trump are racist, bigots, they're homophones, etc. And that's not necessarily the case. Some people voted for Trump because they felt like that was the only way to bring change into our country. Some people voted for Trump because they genuinely felt that he espoused specific values that they held that weren't necessarily racist or anything else, but that's what they believed. Some people voted for Trump because, yeah, they are racist and they are homophones and they don't want... They're afraid of other different segments of people getting the same rights or being treated the same way or having the same opportunities. Some people just wanted to feel like they weren't going to be scraping by as hard. That gas and groceries, etc., wouldn't cost as much. And we can point the finger at them and say, like how dare you? And it's very easy to do that. And yet I don't think that demonization is the solution. I don't think that demonizing other people is the solution here. I think that listening and trying to understand and connect is part of the solution. I think community is part of the medicine, and I think that doing this work and helping people understand, like, look, here's the impact. Here's the impact of your choice. This is how it's going to affect other people. And whether they believe it or not, I mean, at the end of the day, I can't, get somebody to believe it, but they have to make that choice themselves. They have to kind of look at the evidence and see for themselves and take from it what they will. But really, at the end of the day, like, what we're kind of dealing with here is, like, what do we do to heal ourselves? What do we do to change society? And that change isn't going to happen by demonizing people, and it's not going to happen by demonizing men either. It'd be really easy to say, well, all men are horrible people. But I don't feel like that's the case any more than I would say that about anybody else. And of course, I'm a white man saying that, so I take it all with a grain of salt. But I'm also a white man that voted according to his conscience, and it wasn't for Trump. And I feel some fear and anxiety right now, with the direction that the United States is going in. And I have to accept that at the end of the day, it's going to be what it's going to be, and that it's going to be, it's like, at this point, it's my ability to respond and how I respond. But I think that men's work is essential. I'm going to continue writing about it. I'm going to continue posting videos. I'm going to continue sharing because I genuinely believe that part of the solution here is doing this work. It has changed my life. It has helped me become a better person and a better man in a way that has allowed me to show up, and it's continuing to change my life. And I've made some mistakes along the way. Like, it wasn't like I waved a magic wand and all of a sudden, like, oh, yep, there's Taylor 2.0 and he doesn't have all the issues. Nope. I've made some mistakes even on this journey. And yet I've been able to take responsibility for those mistakes and address them in a way that I wouldn't have been able to do 2 years ago or 3 years ago. So this is really important work. And for the people who are kind of like, why are you doing this, Taylor? What's going on with you? Why are you into men's work? That's why. And you don't have to agree with it. You may very well disagree with it. But I'm here to connect with and help other men transform their work, even as I continue to do, or transform their lives through their work, even as I continue to do this work on myself. And I would really urge any and all of you that are men or identify as men to please come do this work. Come discover what it's like when you're in a situation where you're not alone, where you can let down your guard and express what you need to express, knowing that yes, you know that it may require some discomfort, it may require you to face yourself in certain ways, but also knowing that it liberates you and frees you to be the best possible man that you can be and challenges you to continue improving yourself. That's why we do this work. That is part of the central philosophy of the Sovereign's Code, which is a program that I'm working on and going to be releasing here hopefully by the beginning of January at the absolute latest. And you know, this is work that I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life to help transform the way that I show up in the world, but also the way other men show up in the world in a way that is ultimately safe for ourselves, safe for other people, and also hopefully safe for the world itself. Thanks for watching, and if you have questions about the men's work, feel free to drop a comment. If you haven't read my work, The Quest for Mature Masculinity, this book is available now, and it explores some of these very themes. I'm going to be continuing to write even more books on the men's work, and all this is geared toward helping men transform their lives, but it's also geared toward helping other people understand this work and show up in a better way. So thank you for watching this, and again, please share it if you're on YouTube, or restack it if you're on Substack, and let's continue this process of changing our lives and becoming safer men for ourselves and for the world around us.